Hi, this is Conversation Christ, and this is my full testimony. I did my testimony a long time ago, but it's been about 10 months since I did it, so I thought I'd do it again. And I'm gonna go unscripted here, so I'll try not to digress too much. So I come from a family of 5. I have 2 brothers, an older brother and a younger brother. And my parents, they divorced when I was 10 years old. And that was due to a couple reasons. The first was my older brother. He was very difficult. He was actually diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, and that's actually psychopathy, essentially. So he was very difficult to manage. And then my younger brother is mentally handicapped. So I was kind of stuck in the middle of that. So what happened was my parents did not agree on how to raise my older brother, and he was very difficult to parent. He was abusive of me and my younger brother, and that's what led to my parents' divorce, because my mom was trying to stop my older brother from abusing us, but my dad, he didn't do anything about it. So that's what led to my parents' divorce. So I was 10 at the time, like I said, and that was very hard on me. That was probably the first major traumatic event that I can remember. After that, I moved in half time with my mom and then half with my dad. I was playing soccer on a competitive soccer team, and that was awesome. That's probably one of the best times of my life was playing soccer. And I played until grade 10 and then I quit. I'll get into that later though. So by age 12, I started to get interested in drugs and I started drinking. I think it was mainly because I was just really depressed and pretty upset over my family situation. Still getting used to my parents' divorce. So I started drinking at 12, and I was kind of learning about cannabis and magic mushrooms and all this stuff. I'd spend like hours on the computer researching about different drugs, planning to use them because it was a way of escape. So at the same time, I was still really focused on school. I took school very seriously. I did well up until at least grade 10, and I would get like a 90 average usually. And then once I got to grade 10, that's when I started to unravel. That's when I stopped playing soccer, and that's because I started smoking cigarettes. I got my first job, which is good, but of course at this job I had my coworker, he smoked, and he started offering me cigarettes. And so eventually, it's like if you have the chance to go for a smoke break, you're gonna take the break. And so that's how I started smoking, was from my first job in grade 10. Sadly, that's when I stopped playing soccer because my cardio wasn't nearly as good as it used to be since I was smoking. And that's when I started to skip classes, and I didn't take school nearly as seriously anymore. So my grades really dropped, and by the time I was in grade 11, I was missing a lot of class. I also started to get into heavier drugs. Like in grade 10, I tried cocaine and ecstasy and magic mushrooms and acid and all that kind of stuff. And then in grade 11, that's when I really stopped caring about school. I was barely going to class anymore, and that's when my parents confronted me and forced me into my first rehab when I was 16 years old. So since I was a minor, they could legally compel me to go to rehab. So I went to rehab because I didn't have a choice. And it was a 3-month program, just a secular program. and I graduated from that. But it wasn't very good. It wasn't a very good program because they would send you home. Like, I went home for Christmas and they didn't do any drug tests or anything when you got back. So I was drinking and smoking weed and doing whatever I wanted on the Christmas break. And then when I got back, I didn't get caught for it. So I still graduated. Anyways, when I got back, I didn't stop using. I was probably worse than I was when I left because I was resentful towards my parents for putting me in rehab. So I began to unravel even further. And I was basically just, sneaking out at night, car hopping, which is going into unlocked cars to find change and, electronics and that kind of thing. So I was stealing and I was doing drugs, sneaking out at night, doing whatever I wanted pretty much. And so I was given the option shortly after my first rehab to go to rehab again or just move out. And if I moved out, then I'd be homeless. I was like 17 at the time. So I was like, okay, I'll go to rehab again. So I went to rehab across the country. I'm in Canada, so it was like all the way to Ontario. And that was another secular program. I was there for 9 months. It was really intense. For the first month, you're out in the middle of the wilderness and you're like portaging, which is you carry a canoe from one lake to another, and you got like these big packs on, and it's hardcore. It was a lot of fun because I was in Algonquin Park, a very famous national park in Ontario. So there were some good things about this being in the program, but we were all young. We were like 17, 18, whatever, and nobody really wanted to stop using. I was planning on getting high as soon as I got home, and actually on one of my home visits I did get high. And unfortunately this program, well, actually I guess it would be fortunately, because it was better to have them drug test you, because what's the point of being there if you're just getting high? So when I got back from one of my home visits, I got tested and I failed, and so I got held back in the program, but I didn't want to stay, and my dad didn't want me to stay because it was a very expensive program. This was a private program, so it's not like it was funded by the government, which meant it was about $400 a day. So it's extremely expensive. So my dad didn't want to keep paying the $400 or $400 a day. So I decided to come home, and he was okay with that because he didn't want to pay the money anymore. But as soon as I got back, I was out of control. I went to a halfway house for about 6 months. And so I was trying to, work some retail job, and, it wasn't going very well. But I was working and I was staying in this halfway house. But eventually I was using too much and I got kicked out of it. And I was homeless, and I had a friend take me in for a bit, but I was not doing well. And so I had my mom mention to me about this Christian rehab teen challenge. And now I didn't mention it before, but I was a devout atheist. I had no interest in religion. I used to mock Christianity, and I had no interest in God or religion at all. But I was so desperate that I asked my mom for help, and I got into Teen Challenge when I was 19 years old. So that was one of the most important decisions of my life, accepting help from my mom and going to Teen Challenge. So this was a year-long program, Christian rehab. So you go to chapel like every morning, and then you do outreaches every Sunday. So you go preach the gospel and fundraise for the program, because it's not government funded. So you have to work to actually fund the program. You pay $1,000 entry fee, but the rest of the year, you don't pay at all. So you have to work. There's a work detail every day, 5 days a week, and then you do the outreaches on Sunday to do some fundraising. So about 3 months into the program, I gave my life to Christ because what I was doing wasn't working. I needed to do something drastic, and I was so empty inside. And I saw, like, you know, former clients of the program, the graduates, you know, they were actually succeeding. They were sober and they seemed happy, and I wanted that. So, you know, I took that leap of faith 3 months in and became a Christian. So that was the most important decision of my life, and I'll never forget it. It was very awkward though, doing the prayer, the sinner's prayer, or just accepting Jesus into my life. Now praying is pretty much second nature, but yeah, I've come a long way. So I finished that program. It was a year long, like I said, and it's a very difficult program. I would say maybe 50% of the clients actually graduate. Most people, or half the people, they end up leaving. So I graduated from Teen Challenge and I was 20 years old. Unfortunately though, I had it in my mind that I could handle drinking. It wasn't soon after that I got home from Teen Challenge that I actually had my first drink. It was about 2, maybe 3 weeks after I got back from the program. And that was a very bad decision because I can't really drink just a small amount. If I'm gonna drink, I'm gonna get drunk. Like, I'm trying to get hammered. And so I ended up going into university shortly after getting back from Teen Challenge, and I was just doing an open studies program, and I was upgrading to get into engineering. So that's what I was doing for the next year. And then I was gradually drinking more and more frequently, and then eventually I started smoking weed again. I met somebody at the university, he smoked weed, and I, gradually got back into drugs. And also, while I was at university, doing the open studies program, I met a girl, and that was not the first relationship I've had, but it was the first relationship I had as a Christian. So I ended up moving cities to live with her, and that fell apart very quickly because I was using weed and I didn't tell her about it, and I got caught, and so she broke up with me. So it was pretty painful because I moved cities to be with her. I mean, it was kind of my fault because I wasn't honest with her, but yeah, that was brutal. So anyways, I made a lot of bad choices. So what happened was, I was in this new city and I had my heart broken, but I didn't let it ruin me at first. I started working, I got a new good job, and I was living on my own. Well, it was a shared house. We were living shared accommodation. And I was working full time, supporting myself. And that was good until about a year later when I started to get pretty depressed and homesick and stuff. And so I took a break from work, and because I couldn't go to my job every morning, I was really struggling. So I took some time off, but of course, idle time is the devil's playground. I think that's the saying, I can't remember though. Anyway, I had nothing to do, and so I eventually started getting into hard drugs. I was using coke again, and eventually I tried crack, and it wasn't soon after that I had to move out of my house because I didn't have any money left. So I was homeless for, it ended up being, that was the second time. And I was on the street for maybe 2 months, and I ended up living in a stolen car for about a month. And once I couldn't keep doing it anymore, and I was like losing a bunch of weight, I called my mom and asked for help, and she helped me. Thank you, Mom. So she helped me get into rehab for the 4th time. And this was a secular program, and I graduated from that. It was very cushy, totally different from Teen Challenge. So this 4th program, you know, you didn't have to like do any chores, or you don't have to work at all, which is kind of crazy to think about. It was almost like a vacation. So anyways, I graduated from that. When I got home, I started upgrading to get into engineering because I hadn't completed that yet. And eventually I did. I did get into engineering. And unfortunately, by the time I actually got into my engineering degree or program, I was using coke again. So I was back to hard drugs. So it's been back and forth, back and forth. And when I was just starting my program, I barely went to any classes because I was getting high all the time. And so I dropped out of my university degree, my engineering degree. And that was devastating to me because I put so much time and effort into upgrading. I ended up getting a 90 average, and I was just devastated because that was my dream, was to be an engineer. I always said, you know, since I was a little kid, I'm mathematically and scientifically inclined. I enjoy those subjects as well. So it was pretty devastating that I failed at engineering. And so I took some time off. I basically stopped doing any work, and I was really depressed. And after that, I was very angry, and I did some therapy, and I did a psych assessment, and I ended up getting diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, and I didn't take it very well. I was extremely upset with my mom and the rest of my family. Unfortunately, I took it out on my mom, even though most of it really, it wasn't her fault. And she kicked me out of her place. So I was homeless for, it was like the 3rd or 4th time at that point. And I ended up getting a concussion. And that was from like, you know, I was so tired from not sleeping. And I fell on the bus and hit my head. And I was knocked out for, I don't know, maybe like 20 minutes or something. And anyways, so after getting out of the hospital, I reached out to my mom telling her what happened. She let me back in with her, and it was a long road to recovery from my concussion. I was super depressed, I was really out of it, and I ended up being bedridden for maybe about 3 years. And so in that time being bedridden, I wasn't just spending a lot of time in bed, I was also using hard drugs. I was using crack and meth, and that really causes, you know, you to tense up when you're on such a strong stimulant like that. So anyways, after about 3 years of being bedridden and doing these drugs, my body became extremely tight and I had chronic pain. And so fortunately it was a motivation it was the motivation I needed to stay sober. So God used it for good. I was able to stop using because whenever I used, I felt so much worse than I ever used to. The agony of recovering from like the hangover, it was unbearable. So it was in 2020 when I was first able to stay sober for longer than like 2 weeks on my own. So 2 weeks turned into a month, and then a month turned into 3 months, and then eventually it was like 12 months, and I stayed sober. For about that first year, I had a relapse, went back to using for a bit, but fortunately I was able to stay sober again in 2022, and I've been sober since then. So now I've been sober for over 2 years, and that's the longest I've ever been sober, and I give all the credit to God, who used my pain to keep me sober. He gave me a thorn in my flesh like Paul had, and I'm so grateful for it. And then it was on October 7th of last year, when the Hamas attack on Israel happened, that God sent me a message telling me to start a YouTube channel to reach out to people online and just be a shining light for others that are living in darkness, and reach out to those who need hope, and I could share my hope with them. So this channel I did not anticipate making at all. It was definitely because of God, and I'm so grateful for my channel now. It's been such a blessing in my life. So that is a quick testimony. I probably missed the odd event here or there. If you have any questions, please ask me. I'll answer anything you want. If I have anything to amend, then I'll do that. That's pretty much it. So thank you for watching, and I love you all. If you don't know Jesus yet, but you would like to follow him, then just say this prayer with a genuine heart. Dear Lord Jesus, I know that I am a sinner, and I ask for your forgiveness. I believe you died for my sins and rose from the dead. I turn from my sins and invite you to come into my heart and life. I want to trust and follow you as my Lord and Savior.
Hi friend, if you enjoy Conversation Christ content, then please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and if you want, feel free to make a donation. Thank you.